Well, Bimblers, it's been a while. I have to apologise, but it wasn't my fault. It was that pesky weather. We kept having those 20-mile-an-hour winds and the driving rain. And I don't mind going out bimbling in weather like that. In fact, I did go out on my bike a few times. But I do mind all my camera equipment getting ruined. So I couldn't film any bimbles, I'm afraid. But I did go on a few recce's, so I've got some ideas at least. But one of my ideas starts today, being that the weather is perfect. Or maybe a little bit windy, but it's alright in comparison. I've decided that we're going to do the whole of National Cycle Route 62, the Trans Pennine Trail. But don't get too excited, because I'm not going to do it all in one go. It's not like a big challenge video. I'm going to do it in little chunks. So today's chunk starts here in Fleetwood. That's the start of National Cycle Route 62, depending on which end of the country you start at. And we're going to try and get to Kirkham, which is 23 miles from here. But we might not end up getting that far. Although when I go out on my bike, I think nothing of 23 miles, that's a tiny little distance. But when I'm filming my little bimbles, it takes a little bit longer. And every time I stop to do a piece to camera like this and tell you some history about something, well, that all takes about an hour. And we're still limited by daylight, so we'll see what we get done. We'll either get to Kirkham or we'll get to Lytham. One or the other. So I think it's time to get to the start line and get bimbling. What do you reckon? National Cycle Route 62. Let's bimble.
Things to show me, but life just keeps turning back to the way things were before. Oh, knew this time you would still see all that became attached from the way things were before. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It changed with time. You still know me. We just keep facing back to the way things were before. It should plainly show what we're meant to know. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. Edged over lines, days keep moving.
Well, Bimblers, we have to let you in on a few secrets of the trade. The tide has rather ruined the continuity of this video. On my way to Fleetwood this morning, I had to ride from Blackpool south to Fleetwood because there's no train that goes to Fleetwood, which is weird because Fleetwood only exists because of trains. Well, that's for another bimble. And I thought as we went past where our next VT is going to be from, I thought I should do it now in case the tide comes in. And I was correct. The tide is very much coming. So it's a word to the wise. If you are coming to see the subject of our next VT, make sure the tide's out. I'll leave you in the capable hands of myself earlier. This is the shipwreck of the Abana, and it was wrecked here on the 22nd of December 1894, and it was sailing from Liverpool to Savannah, Georgia in the USA, and it was caught in a storm and the sails were ripped to shreds. The crew of the Abana mistook the new Blackpool Tower for a lighthouse. Blackpool Tower had only been built in May of that year, and they seen the lights at the top and they assumed it must be a lighthouse. Blackpool's lifeboat crew were alerted by the owner of the Cleveley's Hotel, but because of the storm they couldn't sail over to the Abana. They actually had to drag the lifeboat down the beach all the way from near Blackpool Tower to here in Little Bispam, and by the time they got here the Abana had run aground. Thankfully the whole crew of 17 plus the ship's dog were all safely brought to shore, and also the lifeboat crew, there was 16 of those as well, and they were all taken to the Red Lion pub over the road. And to thank the owner of the Cleveley's Hotel for raising the alarm, he was given the ship's bell and the ship's dog. The ship's bell is actually still on display in St Andrew's Church in Cleveley's. But this isn't the only oddity on Blackpool seafronts. Let's Bimble. Obviously if you're passing through Blackpool you get to see the big Blackpool Tower, and you've got the choice of 3 piers. North Pier, that's my favourite, Central Pier or South Pier. You've also got the trams, the donuts, the ice cream. Little handy hint, if you need to visit the toilet, in Coral Island's your place. They have very well kept toilets that are free, so you just decamp there. You can have a go on the slots as well and try a look at a bit of Sega Rally. Do they still have Sega Rally? Have I just shown my age? On top of all that, they have a rather famous amusement park, which we shall bimble to now. Let's bimble.
Extraordinary life, time just keeps falling back to the way things were before.
Well, Bimblers, I literally could be doing this from anywhere, but I promise you, I'm sat inside a whale's tail because it's the only place that I can get out of the wind. But I'm overlooking Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Blackpool Pleasure Beach was opened in 1896 by a man with a very long name, Alderman William George Bean. And William Bean wanted to be an advertising executive on Madison Avenue in the US. But he didn't do very well. So he took all his money and he opened an amusement park here in Blackpool because he'd been inspired by Coney Island when he'd been over in New York. The name Pleasure Beach isn't just a clever name because it's next to the beach. It actually comes from the fact that the original amusement park was built on the beach. And in fact, even today, if you were to take up some of the walkways and look under some of the rides, you'd see sand underneath them. In 1903, William Bean, or Mr. Bean, joined forces with a John Alfwaite, and they bought 30 more acres of land and extended the park out, and it went from strength to strength. It was so popular that they decided to open a second amusement park over in Morecambe, and they called it Frontierland, and that operated from 1909 up until the late 90s, I think. I went there in the 90s with the Boys Brigade. Unfortunately, in 1911, John Alfwaite died, and the controlling share of the amusement parks went over to Mr. Bean. But Mr. Alfwaite's family still owned shares. They just didn't have any control over anything. After the success of 2 amusement parks, Mr. Bean decided that he was going to open a 3rd amusement park, and he opened one in Southport called Pleasureland. And I imagine in a later episode of this National Cycle Route 62 video series, we will bimble past it. In 1929, William George Bean died, and the ownership of the park was passed down to his daughter, Lillian Doris Bean. And she married a Leonard Thompson, so she became Lillian Doris Thompson. And the Thompson family still own and look after the park to this day. If you're interested in Blackpool Pleasure Beach, you should probably go on YouTube and search for the 1990s docusoap Pleasure Beach. And that shows several members of the Thompson family. It includes Geoffrey Thompson, who was running it at the time. He's the son of Lillian and Leonard. And his daughter, Amanda Thompson, who runs the park today. In fact, on one episode, Lillian Thompson, at age 94, is seen to be riding the new PlayStation The Ride with Ronan Keating. No, I haven't taken LSD. That really happened in the programme.
All new this time, you would still see all that became attached from the way things were before. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It changed with time. You still know me. We just keep facing back to the way things were before. It should plainly show what we're meant to know. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. Edged over lines, days keep moving, but time just...
Well, Bimblers, we got to St Anne's Pier and we recorded a little VT, but the wind noise was atrocious. So what we're going to have to do is do the talking bit here at Bimble HQ. St Anne's Pier was one of 5 piers on the Fylde coast. There's 4 remaining today. That would be St Anne's Pier, North, Central and South piers in Blackpool. But the pier that's no longer there was in Fleetwood. St Anne's Pier was completed in 1895. That's 2 years after the South Pier in Blackpool. And it was originally 288 metres long. And that was to accommodate steamships coming in and docking at the end. The steamships would come over from Southport, stopping off at St Anne's before going over to North Pier in Blackpool. It was some sort of seaside exchange system where you'd go from one seaside resort to another. Today the pier is only 180 metres long, but that's not why the boats stopped coming. If you've watched my video about Preston Docks, you'll know that the River Ribble used to be unnavigable. It would split off into lots of different streams and come back together as one big confluence, which was no good for getting boats down it. So in 1893 Parliament passed an act, the Ribble Navigation Act, and that gave the River Navigation Company free rein to adjust the flow of the River Ribble. So they hired a man called Robert Stevenson, a Scottish fella, and he dredged the River Ribble to make it navigable for the big ships. But one consequence of doing that was it changed the tides at St Anne's. St Anne's is just inside the estuary of the River Ribble. So from then on, the tide never gets deep enough for the ships to dock at the end of the pier. So why is the pier a lot shorter now? Well, it's the old classic reason. It's set on fire. There were 2 pavilions at the end of the pier, and the first pavilion burnt down in 1974, and the second pavilion burnt down in 1982. And from then on, they just cut the pier down to 180 metres. In fact, you can see at the end of the pier, you can sort of see where it was supposed to carry on. And they put a new fence along the end. It's looking in a little bit of a sorry state at the moment, but it is grade 2 listed. And I believe it's non-smoking, so no risk of it setting on fire anytime soon.
You still know me. We just keep facing back to the way things were before. It should plainly show what we're meant to know. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives, edged over lines. Days keep moving, but time just keeps falling back to the way things were before. Just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives.
Well, we're back again, Bimble HQ. My last stop of Lytham Windmill, also ruined by the wind. Everything's ruined by wind. Everything's ruined by winter. I'm probably not going to bother next year. I may hibernate instead. So Lytham Windmill. The Fylde coast is actually quite famous for its windmills. There's 2 windmills on National Cycle Route 90 going into Blackpool as well. And if you usually drive into Blackpool, you'll know that there's a windmill on your way in. It's kind of one of the locations where you get a bit excited. You see the tower, you see the windmill, you know you're going to Blackpool and having some fun. The windmill in Lytham was built in 1805 by a Richard Cookson. And at the time he was given permission to build the windmill there, nobody had any idea of what was coming in the next few years. By the 1860s, the windmill was seen as an industrial nuisance. A lot of posh people had built terraced houses on the front of Lytham, and the windmill grinding flour on the waterfront was a bit of an eyesore. They continued to grind oats and grain up until 1919. And it wasn't the council that stopped them. It was a severe gale, like the ones we've been dealing with. Although when the gale came in, they put the brakes on the sails so that they wouldn't spin too fast. The wind was too powerful, and it managed to turn the sails even with the brakes on, and then the brakes heated up and the whole thing set on fire, and it was completely gutted inside and out, and all that remained was the brickwork. In 1921 it was given to Lytham Council to turn into a kind of curiosity, which is how it is today, and in 1989 it was restored to its full regalia. And usually it has the sails on, but because we've been experiencing very high winds, especially on the day I tried to do this Bimble, they took the sails off so it wouldn't blow away. It was at this point of the Bimble where I decided to call it a day and head to Lytham Station. So the next instalment will start in Lytham and we'll go through Preston, and hopefully we'll get a little bit further. So until next time, happy bimbling. Thanks for watching.